we'd like to get started. I'm Steve Hoover, the CEO of PARC. I'd like to welcome you all here this afternoon for I think what will be a really interesting and exciting talk. It's a pleasure of mine to be able to introduce our speaker, Dr. Ken Washington, who I've had the pleasure to get to know a little bit over the past 3 years. And before I talk about what Ken's going to talk about, I'll give you a little bit of his background because I think it sets it up nicely. So Ken started out working in nuclear engineering, so making nuclear safe for us. And then it was about privacy, protecting the privacy of people's information for Lockheed Martin. In fact, was the first chief privacy officer of that. So, one of those easy problems. And since that wasn't enough, he then worked and led the advanced technology for space for Lockheed Martin, so putting satellites in space, easy things like that. So when he was bored and looking for the next really hard problem, he moved on to Ford, where he leads their advanced R&D arm, and is looking at the future of mobility, which is being radically changed in today's world through new business models, new technologies, connected cars, et cetera. And so I'm really excited to hear what Ken's going to tell us about the Ford and the future of mobility. So thank you, Ken.
Well, thank you, Steve, and welcome, everyone. It's great to be with you today. I'm going to spend about 30 minutes giving you some overviews of what we're doing in mobility. Hopefully leave enough time. I definitely am going to leave enough time for Q&A and dialogue, so be thinking about things to ask me. Let me start by telling you about what we're focused on at Ford. At Ford, we're focused on 3 key priorities. Those 3 priorities are accelerating the pace of our One Ford plan, delivering products with excellence and passion, and driving innovation in every part of our business. But innovation, that's nothing new to Ford. We've been innovating at Ford for over 100 years. Henry Ford was an inventor. He was an innovator. He didn't invent the automobile, but he certainly transformed it from a relatively unknown utility to a household name. He profoundly shaped the 20th century, changed our lives. He continued innovating. He continued to develop ways to change society. He created the assembly line, and he changed the manufacturing landscape. We like to say that he opened the highways to all mankind, literally putting the world on wheels. Well, why am I telling you this? Well, I'm telling you this because that's been the model for the automotive business for about the last 100 years. But the world's changing, and we're changing with it. Now, of course, today, we've got a full range of wonderful cars and trucks to choose from. But that's not enough, because the world is changing around us, and we have to change with it. That's why we say that we've got to be both an automotive company and a mobility company. So what do I mean when I say mobility? I mean, you hear that word tossed around a lot. You hear companies say they're a mobility company. It's more than just going from point A to point B. Mobility is about human progress. It's really about freedom. It's about the freedom to choose where to live, where to work, where to play. Our goal is to help people have the ability to more easily move themselves. People they care about, their goods. For the past several years, we've been warning that our freedom to be mobile is being challenged. It's being challenged by some changes that are happening in the world. It's being challenged by the growth of mega cities, urbanization, people flocking to cities in huge numbers. It's being challenged by the growth of the global middle class. It's being challenged by increasing concerns over air quality and human health associated with congestion. And it's being challenged by changing attitudes that customers have about technology and about transportation. I'm going to talk about each of these in turn, and then I'll shift and talk about some solutions that we're looking at in response to these challenges. All of these trends, they're driving how we're thinking about mobility and about transportation. So the first is urbanization. So what am I talking about? By most measures, today there are 28 megacities. A megacity is defined as an urban environment with more than 10 million people. That's a lot of people. In the next 15 years, by the year 2030, by most people's estimates, there are going to be 41 cities with more than 10 million people. 41 cities with more than 10 million people. I was in a megacity for the first time earlier this year, and it was almost unfathomable to get around. And I think there are 41 locations like that in the world. The second trend is the growing growth of the middle class. There are 2 billion people in the middle class today, and by most estimates, that's going to double in the next 10 to 15 years. The first thing that happens when you enter the middle class is you have disposable income, and the first thing you want to buy with that disposable income is a car. And so put this together with the first mega trend of 41 megacities with more than 10 million people, with another 2 billion people that want to buy a car. So you can imagine the kind of congestion and additional air quality concerns associated with the combination of those two trends. Our infrastructures are not built for this kind of growth and this kind of global change. And on top of all that, the fourth megatrend is customers are thinking differently about the planet. And they're thinking differently about transportation. They're doing shared rides. They've got digital devices in their lives in every corner of everything they do. They think differently about what they expect out of vehicles, what they expect about the transportation ecosystem. The millennial generation has a totally different attitude about driving and driver's licenses and cars. So this is a huge change for us as an automaker. And we're not alone. I mean, just think about the opportunities that are facing many industries and the challenges associated with these four mega trends. Well, we could sit around and, hypothesize about what to do. We could study it. We could worry about it. We could tell stories. But that's not what we're doing. That's not what we're about. We've chosen to do something about it. Earlier this year, in January at the Consumer Electronics Show, our president and CEO, Mark Fields, announced the Forward Smart Mobility Plan. Put simply, Forward Smart Mobility is our plan to use innovation in every part of our business to take us to the next level in connectivity. That's connectivity writ large. Connectivity, autonomous vehicles, big data and analytics, alternative ways to be mobile, flexible usership and ownership of vehicles, and changes, responding to changes in expectations from our consumers. We're doing all that with one foot firmly planted in today and one foot looking at tomorrow. Tomorrow being the next, what's going to happen in the next 5, 10 to 15 years. Where better to explore the possibilities of the future than right here in the heart of Silicon Valley? That's why earlier this year, we announced the opening of the expansion of our presence here in Silicon Valley. In fact, our new Research and Innovation Center in Palo Alto is literally right down the street. You could walk there from here. And one of my friends who's here in the audience knows it's literally right across the street from where I used to work. The point is, we are committed to being here in the Valley to be part of the innovation ecosystem. But it's not just that we're here and we've got a building and we've got people in the building. We're here because we want to build and accelerate our innovation in these 5 areas that make up smart mobility. So the work being done in this facility is to build and develop and to advance our capabilities in connected car, in data and analytics, and we're also working on our autonomous research vehicle at this facility. This is pretty exciting stuff. All of this is aimed at making our customers' lives better, because you have to do something different in the future given these challenges associated with these megatrends that I talked about. The good news is we're not alone. We've got a lot of opportunity for partnerships, and we have a lot of opportunity to build on top of a wave of innovation and technology development. We're at a pretty unique time in the history of technology. Just look around. Reach in your pocket, pull out your cell phone, look at your smartwatch. We live in a wonderful time where technology is everywhere, and it's accelerating at an unprecedented pace. You even have automatic vacuum cleaners. We've got computers on our wrists that are as fast as the nation's supercomputers were 25 years ago. That's why we are here in the Valley, and that's why it's our goal to leverage this wave of innovation, to build on it, to make connectivity, mobility, and autonomous vehicles accessible to everyone. It's no secret or surprise that the tech sector is interested in the automobile industry, given this wave of innovation. And we're not sitting still. We're driving innovation in our business, leveraging this wave of innovation. Our goal is to make this technology accessible to everyone, just like Henry Ford did over 100 years ago when he put the world on wheels. So, how do you do that? Well, you do it the good old-fashioned way, just like all researchers do. You experiment. That's kind of new for us at Ford. Over a year ago, we started experimenting. We started talking about it 6 months ago. We launched and revealed that we started doing experimentation all over the world with new modes of mobility, where we've launched over 25 experiments exploring customers' needs, desires, wants, alternative ways to get around, injecting technology into the options of how to get from point A to point B. In addition to the ways we've been doing it for the last 100 years, which is buying a car, driving a car, parking it, 7 years later buying another one. So tonight what I want to do is I want to share with you some examples of a few of the experiments we've done over the last year or so. And I'll focus on a few that have been kind of the cornerstones of examples of why we're really excited about this opportunity. And a few of these are transitioning from experiment to implementation. You also experiment because you want to learn. So the key to the experimentation is to extract the learning and then to fold that back into your products and to use it to design new services. So I'll talk to you about how we're doing that as well. So first up, driving on demand. Earlier this year, actually several weeks ago, we launched the Go Drive service in London. This started as an experiment, and a few weeks ago we transitioned to an initial offering where we have now 50 cars in 20 locations in London where consumers can book a vehicle on a smartphone, pick it up at any one of these 20 designated locations, drive it for however long they want, pay by the minute, and drop it off at any one of these other 20 locations and pay by the minute. And what they really love about this is, now remember, this is in London. If anyone's ever been in London, you know that one of the biggest headaches is, where am I going to park? You don't have to worry about this with Go Drive because the vehicles are dropped off at a designated location and you've got guaranteed parking. So people love that. They also told us that they love the fact that even though they might never want to own an electric vehicle, they could use an electric vehicle in London. And they could feel good about using it for a few hours, being good to the planet, being quieter, trying out a new technology, not having to worry about range anxiety because they're just using it a few hours in the city. And when they pick it up, they know it's going to be charged. So this is really exciting for us, and we're looking forward to taking it to the next phase. The second experiment that I want to talk to you about is peer-to-peer car sharing. So the way this works is if you buy a Ford car and you finance it through the Ford credit system, you can do a peer-to-peer car sharing with someone else who's in the system. They benefit because they don't have to, buy the car. They can just rent it from you. And you benefit because you're getting some of the money back because you don't use your car all the time. So this is a really exciting thing. And we just announced this earlier this week where customers can, in any of these locations, can participate in this program. This is going to help us gauge which vehicles customers like the best. At the same time, it's going to give value to the customers who rent their vehicles because on average, people use their vehicle about 5% of the time. The other 90% of the time, it's sitting in a parking lot or in their garage. And it's going to help us provide new ways for those who are not yet ready to buy a Ford car to try one out. So this is a triple win. It's a win for the people who lease cars, to those who buy cars and finance it. It's a win for those who want to use it, and it's a win for Ford because people are trying our cars at basically no risk, and it's also giving us insight about which vehicles people like the best. So we're really excited about this, and we're looking forward to seeing what kind of other insights and learnings we get from this as we go forward. But mobility is about more than cars. That's why we started experimenting with bikes. Yes, I said bikes. Ford and bikes, imagine that. We did 2 really exciting experiments with bikes. I want to talk about each of those. So here's the first one. This is something called InfoCycle. With InfoCycle, the way it works is we equip a bike with a sensor that's strapped to the bike. In fact, you might have seen some of these bikes running around Palo Alto because we started this at our Palo Alto facility just right down the road. But the way it works is these bikes get ridden around and they collect meaningful data about the journey. Well, so why would you want to do that? So here's why you might want to do that. The reason that this is interesting is because bikes can collect data about the environment that's difficult to collect from a vehicle. They ride on bike paths. You can actually see micro elevations. You can get tip tilt of the bicycle as it rides around. You can get information about vehicles that are around you. You can get information, all kinds of information about the environment around you. We envision in the future data from these bikes can be combined with data from vehicles because we're both a vehicle and a mobility company. So we can combine vehicle data with bicycle data to extract and develop information about traffic patterns, microclimates in cities, even areas in real time that you might want to advise other bikers to avoid. So we're really excited about this one. We're so excited about it that we're now in the process of expanding this experiment. By the end of the year, we hope to have 1,000 e-bikes riding around the roads, gathering data, getting insights, filling up an information database that other bikers and other cars can use to make their journeys more enjoyable, safer, and more effective. I'll give a shout out to our colleagues at Flextronics. We're also working with them to help us figure out how to miniaturize this InfoCycle device to be smaller and be able to secure and integrate into the bicycle more securely. Again, an example of why we're here in Silicon Valley, to foster collaborations like that. Okay, so I'm going to talk about our second bike experiment. Our second bike experiment is something we call e-bike. So this experiment had a couple of different dimensions to it. E-bikes, that's shorthand for electric bike. And in this experiment, it started with a challenge. We challenged our employees to design a smart e-bike, not just any e-bike. We challenged them to design e-bikes that would integrate in with a vehicle to be part of a multimodal mobility journey. But we also asked them to design an e-bike that would be smart and interact with electronics, with a smartphone. And boy, did they respond. We got over 130 designs from our employees. I think that told us that there was like a lot of pent-up energy and enthusiasm about this opportunity for mobility. Earlier this year at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, we revealed 2 of those designs. And I want to talk about how these 2 designs work. Those 2 designs are the Mode Me, a personal e-bike, and the Mode Pro, a commercial delivery e-bike. So first, the Mode Me e-bike. It's cute, isn't it? This is a commuter e-bike, and the way it works is you can fold it up and actually carry it. It's really light. You can carry it with you. You can take it on a subway. You can stick it in the trunk of your car. It gives you assisted pedaling. If you're commuting in to the city, you commute in to the point where traffic gets really horrible. You park where parking is free. You pull out your e-bike in sunny California where it never rains in the summer. You unfold it, you hop on, and you ride it. Now, I know what you're thinking, that why would I ride an e-bike? I don't want to get to work and be all sweaty. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, so hold that thought. The second bike is something we call Mode Pro. This is our commercial commuter and delivery e-bike. With the Mode Pro, it is designed to interface with our Transit Connect van. Professionals use the Transit Connect van to commute to and deliver goods and services to customers. So imagine a scenario where you're delivering a service or delivering some goods in your Transit Connect, and you run into the same congestion situation, and you could park your Transit Connect, you unfold your Mode Pro, you snap on your goods and delivery items, your tools, whatever it might be, and you ride your Mode Pro to the final destination. Now, all this works because these are e-bikes and they provide assisted pedaling. They're all equipped with a 200 watt, 9 amp electrical power source to assist the rider up to 15 miles per hour. They both also interface with an application, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. Before I talk about that, I'm pleased to share with you, you're one of the first to know that Ford has also introduced a third e-bike. We call it the Mode Flex. This is our most flexible e-bike yet. That's why it's called the Mode Flex. The whole idea of Mode Flex is you can snap it apart like shown here. The top comes off, the back comes off, for a couple of reasons. One, so you can stow it easily in the back of your truck or car. Snaps apart literally in seconds. But you can also replace the front and the back with a different kind of front or back end, thus flex. So if you want a mountain bike, you snap on the mountain bike front. If you want a road bike, you snap on the road bike front. Pretty cool idea. We're really excited about this e-bike. It's going to offer lots of options for the commuter and for those who want an e-bike on the weekend and keep up with their friends if they need a little assistance. So now for the really cool part. Because these are e-bikes, they're digital devices. They're designed to interact and interface with a rider's smartphone through an app that we developed called Mode Link. This app provides real-time information about weather, road congestion, parking costs, because recall, this interacts with your car, real-time traffic, public transportation schedules. It even allows you to have eyes-free navigation because the app on the phone interfaces and talks to the bike, and through haptics on the handlebars will buzz and tell you when you need to turn left or turn right. Because you program the destination into the app. It even turns on the little hand signals on the bike when you get to the turn. You can even access it on a smartwatch. Pretty cool. So here's the point. These bikes, both the InfoCycle experiment and the e-bikes, are telling us that bikes are a viable element of a multimodal that is more than one mode for getting around in a mega city. And it has stimulated and sparked lots of great ideas for how we might string together these multiple solutions. And every time we talk about these bikes, we're always asked, well, when can I have one? When can we put it into place? We're not selling these yet, and the reason is we want to get it right. Because it's not just a bike, it's part of a multimodal urban solution. And that's the next phase of our work, is to work on that. But before I get to that, it's important to talk about one of the last pieces of the puzzle, and that's parking. Searching for a parking spot can be frustrating and time-consuming. We've all been there, right? In addition to being frustrating and time-consuming, by some studies, up to 30% of vehicle emissions in a city can be attributed to people circling around looking for a parking spot. That's pretty big. So we can give people time back, we can relieve their frustration, and we can be good to the planet if we can help solve parking. So that's why we started some experimentation with parking. We started an experiment called Parking Spotter. The way Parking Spotter works is it uses the sensors that are already built into the vehicle. We have ultrasonic sensors on most Ford vehicles to spot a parking space as the vehicle drives by. And it does this automatically because it's got high enough fidelity to do so. And then it sends that information up to the cloud, and then we do some analytics on it, and then make it accessible to others who follow, thereby making the parking experience more enjoyable and taking less time. During our experimental phase, we proved out a couple things. The first thing we proved out is that, because we didn't really know, because you don't do an experiment if you already know the answer, right? So the first thing we found in this experiment is that these sensors really do work pretty darn well. And you can really do this. And then that led us to understand that a city would be very interested in this, because this is a much more efficient and a much more cost-effective way of helping city citizens find a parking spot than retrofitting parking spaces and city infrastructure with expensive sensors. The second thing we learned is that these systems can actually be integrated in with other city systems if cities have already made such an investment. And last but not least, we learned that these parking spot identifiers can be integrated in with other databases about parking in cities to help solve key pain points around parking. It can help people resolve questions like, how much is this parking spot going to cost? Even though it's a parking spot, am I allowed to park there? How will that spot cost vary over the course of the day? And so on and so forth. So we learned a lot about parking. And that will help us resolve, in combination with bicycles and vehicles, sharing of cars, cars on demand, solutions to city urban mobility challenges. So to summarize, we're experimenting, but now we've experimented, but now we're moving from experimentation to the beginning of implementing some of these solutions. And now's the time to put some focus on what things we're going to really bring forward to market as a service. we've chosen to focus on two things. We're going to focus on enabling flexible use and ownership of cars and trucks, and multimodal urban mobility solutions. We're well on our way to enabling flexible use and ownership of vehicles with the GoDrive pilot and with the peer-to-peer sharing. And it couldn't have come at a better time, because as we've surveyed our customers and consumers all over the world, including Gen X, Y, and Z, they've told us three key things. The first is that car sharing is something they absolutely would do, because we were a little concerned people wouldn't do it. Well, the jury's in. We know the answer is yes. People will do that. The second thing they're telling us is that fractional ownership, the motive for doing that is saving money. And if you set it up so people save money, they're willing to do that too. And our peer-to-peer pilot is enabling people to do that. And last but not least is there's a pretty significant group of people who are willing and interested and eager to use a pay-as-you-go model, particularly those who live in crowded urban cities. So we're well on our way with these two pilots, but we're not going to stop there. We're going to continue to do new experiments. We're going to continue to focus on this area of flexible use and ownership. So watch this space and more to come. Next up, multimodal urban mobility solutions. This is important because in many cities, you can't get to where you want to go by just taking the bus, or just taking the BART, or just driving your car. Certainly not by just riding a bike. Sometimes you got to do a little bit of everything. And if car is in there at all, you have to park. So we know that solving mobility challenges in a megacity is going to require a combination of 2 or 3 or more of these mobility solutions. A lot of the building blocks are in place. But there are a lot of people waiting for these solutions. There are 7 billion people on the planet today. And by 2050, there's going to be 9 billion people in these 41 megacities. So we've got to make it easy. And we can't expect these people to stitch it together by themselves. We have to stitch these things together and make it easy and automatic. That's where we're putting our focus. So all the parts and pieces that I talked about, e-bikes, cars on demand, parking assisted and revealed by sensors on vehicles, these are the building blocks that are going to enable us to bring multimodal urban solutions to our customers in the future. And that's where we're putting our focus. So when you hear us, Ford, say we're a automaker and a mobility company, that's what we mean. We're going to leverage our DNA of making cars that people love, cars that are high quality, safe, green, and smart, and mobility solutions that use those vehicles and enable them to interoperate easily with other mobility modes like e-bikes, public transportation, and so on and so forth, and parking. This is possible because we took the risk of doing some experimentation over a year ago. And in that experimentation, we've had a lot of learnings. And we're using those learnings to help shape and define how to do that stitching. And that's where we're putting our focus today. And a lot of that work is happening in our Research and Innovation Center here in Palo Alto. As we enter one of the most transformative times in the history of technology, it couldn't be more important that we're putting our emphasis on innovating in every corner of the business. Our goal in doing this isn't just to innovate for innovation's sake. It's to help make people's lives better and to change the way the world moves, just like our founder did over 100 years ago. He put the world on wheels. We're going to enable the world to move with ease, to change how the world moves again through advanced mobility solutions. Thanks for listening. I appreciate you coming. Let's open it up for some dialogue. Okay, I think you were first.
So, here in Silicon Valley, we can design bikes, we can invent car sharing systems. A lot of the things that you talked about are already going on here. However, there's some things that the OEMs like Ford can do that local companies have difficulty with. As you said yourself, Ford invented the assembly line. It has a global vision. It's good at manufacturing. It's good at internationalization and logistics on the global scale. How about becoming a fab for cars, a contract manufacturer? How about going where Flextronics is, but for automotive?
Well, I would say that we already are a fab. We already know how to manufacture cars, and we do it quite well. We've got a global product development system and a global manufacturing system that it's pretty impressive. And so we know how to do that. A key for the future is for us to be the kind of company that embraces collaboration and partnership with technology companies that don't know how to manufacture and build and do the kind of things that we've been doing for 100 years. But it's important to us to bring value to not only our customers, but also to our company by doing more than just being a manufacturing plant. We don't want to be the handset of the 2015. We want to be a value-added mobility and vehicle company, which is why our partnering strategy here in the Bay is to be part of this community, not just visitors. And so we're opening up discussions with lots of companies in this area, and we're finding the partnering to be very, very healthy and very two-way and helping both parties. So we're looking forward to doing more of that.
I got a curiosity question and a real question. I just wonder why you put the peer-to-peer and the car share out here on the West Coast, up there in the northwest corner of Silicon Valley, rather than down here in the center of Silicon Valley. And the real question is, the European Union has a significant mobility initiative going on for the last several years. And one of the most mature is the driverless tram on city streets. Is Ford participating in any of those innovations?
So on your first question, the reason we focused on San Francisco for our peer-to-peer is because we're partnering with a company called GetAround, and that's where they have the majority of their effort is in San Francisco. That doesn't rule out that we wouldn't migrate it south. In fact, as we get success with some of these pilots, I mean they're pilots because they're the first time we've done it. As we experience success, we plan to replicate it in other locations where it makes sense, particularly on the East Coast. So New York would make a lot of sense. Other big cities in North America would make a lot of sense. And we're also looking to take it overseas to some of the big cities in Europe and in Asia Pacific. To your second question, we are talking to the European governments. Not in a place to kind of reveal any details at this point, but we are in discussions with the European government.
Hi, thank you for the talk. It was very informative. I have a question. So as you talk about, urban multimodal approach to mobility, what I'm curious about is there is no one-size-fits-all. So for example, like I was involved in a project where we were doing some user research in some Southeast Asian countries, and it turns out like they have rules about which days of the week you can take your car out on. So I'm curious, how do you plan on adapting this to, various places? Are you partnering with the government, the infrastructure there?
Yeah, so we formed a global mobility team. We have members in Asia Pacific and China. We have people on our team from Australia. We have people on our team from Italy. There are people on our team from Europe and from North America. And so we plan to develop region-specific pilots that make sense for the region. For example, the partners that you use in China will not be the partners you use in North America. You've got the Alibabas and the Tencents and the Baidus of the world in China that you need to talk to. And the same thing in Europe. They have different telecom companies, Vodafone and Orange and others that we don't even know about here in North America. So our solutions in the various regions will be region-specific, and we have teams in those regions to help us design those.
I wanted to thank you for your talk, and in particular, all the solutions related to multimodal transit is generally an underaddressed area. I was in particular intrigued by the e-bikes. We have a project here at PARC you may know about, and I'm wondering who you see as your target audience for the e-bikes. Do you see your target audience as people who are already biking and want a different kind of bike, or people who aren't biking and the e-bikes is an entryway for them?
Well, some of our early analysis is telling us that it's not going to be people who are like hardcore bikers because they don't want assistance. These e-bikes provide you with assistance. It's going to be people who want to ride bikes who find it challenging and difficult, particularly those who live in cities that are very hilly. So that's our instinct, but quite frankly, we haven't yet launched a full-blown pilot with our e-bikes where we put them out for the public to try. That's next. And as we do that, that's one of the questions we're looking to answer. Is to gather data on who are the demographics that are going to flock to these things. But most of the folks who have expressed interest at this point are folks who are not the hardcore bikers.
I think every one of the projects you mentioned has a potential privacy exposure. What are you doing about that?
Boy, that's one of my favorite topics. I spent 3 years as a privacy officer. And I can tell you that the best way to solve or to position yourself to address privacy concerns is to bake it in up front. And that's exactly what we're doing. We have a team at Ford that is comprised of privacy experts from our legal department and from our IT organization. And I'm available to that team as a consultant, given my background. And our goal is to ensure that we always keep the mindset that it's not our data. We're the stewards of the data. And so there's several principles around protecting the privacy and staying true to privacy best practices and principles. And that is, good stewardship of the data. It's not yours. You're the steward. Make sure you protect it and make sure you give the ability for people to have choice and opt in and opt out. And so we're doing all of those things in all of our processing.
I'm old enough to remember the 50s when your unnamed competitor came out with Motorama and had this wonderful presentation about how the highways of the future were going to have magnetics underneath them, and all we had to do was get ourselves on there to get to our locations.
Yep.
Now I'm living in 2015,
Yep.
and I cannot get from Palo Alto to San Francisco on 101, and it's getting just as bad on 280.
Yep.
So there are your new parking lots. What are you doing about the connections?
I hear stories like that everywhere I go. And those are the stories that give me energy to accelerate our work because, it's not getting any better. If you think 101 is bad, try getting from the airport in Sao Paulo to downtown hotel. It took me 2.5 hours to do that when I went there to give a talk. And so these highways are so congested that we have to find ways to make the commute more enjoyable. And a big part of that solution, I believe, is just making it easier for people to do ride sharing. One of the experiments we did was something we called social shuttle. And this whole experiment was designed around making it fun to share a shuttle ride. And so in our analysis, we found that people were hesitant to share a shuttle ride because they associate shared rides like on buses with this kind of smelly, horrible, dirty experience. And so what if you could make it both fun and clean and safe? And then we found that people would not only do it, but they prefer that. And so solutions like that have to become available for people who are willing and have a lifestyle set up to enable that. Those are the only solutions that are going to allow the existing infrastructures to get less crowded. So we're one of many people working on solutions like that. And we've just got to keep accelerating progress because the roads won't support additional vehicles in certain areas as more and more people enter the middle class and as population increases. So I feel your pain, and that's why we've put a focus on this area.
Hi, Ken. Jeff Ballou from NVIDIA.
Hi, Jack.
There's been some press in just the last few days about Ford and automated driving.
Yeah.
Taking it from a research level into kind of a pre-development or shifting that focus. Could you talk a little bit about that, please?
Sure. I was on a panel early this week talking about that very topic. And so let me fill the rest of you in. In 2013, we started a research program to develop a fleet of autonomous vehicles. And we differentiate fully autonomous vehicles, a research fully autonomous vehicle, from the cars you can buy today that have technologies on them that help you be a better and safer driver. So we think about autonomy in 3 categories at Ford. The first category is what we call driver assist. Driver assist technologies do just that. They assist the driver by telling you some information that'll help you be a better driver, like blind spot dots on your mirror that tells you somebody's in your blind spot, like a warning when that you're drifting out of your lane, or a light that'll blink and make noise if you're not braking fast enough so that you can avoid hitting the car in front of you. The second category is semi-autonomous. This is a category where the sensor is sensing something about the environment, but it also takes some degree of control over either the steering, braking, or acceleration to help make your journey safer or more enjoyable. An example of that is adaptive cruise control, lane keep centering technology, and a new technology we're working on called traffic jam assist that will actually help you drive through a traffic jam without constantly applying the brake and acceleration and steering. So these are the first 2 categories. The third category is fully autonomous driving. And while the first 2 are the building blocks for fully autonomous, you can't just keep doing more building blocks and get there. You need to add another level of high-resolution sensing using LiDARs and 3-dimensional mapping on a vehicle so that the vehicle can sense in real time the 3-dimensional environment around it and can compare that to an onboard 3D map and then can use the difference to help steer the vehicle and accelerate and brake the vehicle safely in an environment under the right conditions. In 2013, we started a program to build a fleet of vehicles to research and develop the technology to do just that. And the goal of that program was to answer the question, can it be done? Because we didn't know the answer. And we've now answered that question. The answer is yes, it can be done. So now we've transitioned to the next phase, which is an advanced engineering program to answer the question, well, how specifically will you do it? What sensors are you going to buy? What software algorithms will you actually mature and develop? And how do you test and do the testing integration and do the on-road testing and validation and so on and so on. It's the engineering activity to actually prove it out. So we're in that phase right now. And we are absolutely convinced because we've answered the physics problem. So now we're doing the engineering problem. So we are absolutely convinced that within the next 5 years, that's going to mature to the point where we can have fully autonomous driving in the right conditions where the sensors can perform. There will be some conditions where you wouldn't ever want to turn on automatic driving, like in a big, huge snow blizzard or in an area where no one's ever done any 3D mapping, But under kind of typical conditions, within 5 years, we think that's going to be possible.
Ken, can I jump in here since
Sure.
I got the mic?
Sure.
Okay. Thanks very much. My name is Josh.
Hi, Josh.
Thank you. As an ex-car designer, this is really cool.
We think so, too.
However, there's some issues here that I think you either have looked at or you're going to have to look at very carefully. The technology is not the problem. On my way to the forum, the volcano hit and so forth. You've got 9 billion people on the numbers that you put on there. You've got IoT, which is not happening tomorrow. It's already here today, and it's coming at bullet speed care. We've got car companies. I don't know how many there are in the world, but it's got to be at least 50 of those. And they're competitors, so they want to move up in there. And the outcome of a lot of that is, as we know, where innovation gets into the picture, it's called disruptive innovation.
Yep.
And as I look at this, I'm saying, I don't know how this is going to work out. There are other issues aside from the technology issues with regard to people, behavior, human factors, you name it. And those bicycles, by the way, are cool. None of them has looked at any of the ergonomic factors. They still use the old bike, the seat, and so forth. They're not as safe. That hasn't been addressed. So I guess what I'm saying is this is just a cautionary note.
I couldn't agree more. In fact, the panel that I was on earlier this week talking about autonomous vehicles ended with a pretty powerful thought, which is, yes, we say that within 5 years it will be technically possible to do fully autonomous driving under the right environmental conditions and favorable weather. But we end it with the message that there's this whole body of research that still needs to be done regarding policy and legal and interoperability of autonomous vehicles, and how do you use sensor data off of infrastructure and so on and so forth. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to work out the implications of introducing these kinds of technologies into our mobility ecosystem. I couldn't agree more that the same thing applies not only to the autonomous vehicle, but it applies to multimodal mobility solutions as well. That's why we started with experiments. It was really important for us to not just jump in and say, all right, we're going to do a car sharing service. So a big part of our experiments was to gather data about the social dimension. As people started using these services in our experimental mode, we started gathering analytics about, well, what did they hate? What did they like? What were their pain points? What other second and third order side effects in their lives were generated as a result of using this new mode of mobility? So we're gathering a lot of that data, and the analytics around that data is going to play a huge part in how we go forward. No one would ever say that this is easy. There are a lot of moving parts, and that's why it's really important to us that we take our time, get it right, and continue to experiment, take the learning, and fold it into our solutions as we learn. Who's got the mic?
I have
next?
a mic. Hello.
Okay, stand now, know where you are. There you are.
I apologize. Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation.
You're very welcome.
Tremendous amount of information. And I would like to offer to Ford, to back office engineering, some innovation in chemistry that might help. We've gotten to a point now where we can design a fuel for a particular application with the right environmental characteristics, the right air quality characteristics. And I want to offer Ford that opportunity to look at this, to see how it will fit into energizing and driving those bicycles, to reducing air pollution in congested areas. I'm here because I respect Ford in the same way you do.
Thank you.
Right?
Thank you. I appreciate your...
And we can talk later.
Okay, I appreciate your comment. Since you mentioned fuel, let me take a 30-second diversion and talk a little bit about environmental quality and what we're doing in powertrain. We're really excited about the future of mobility and being both a vehicle and a mobility company, and the things we're doing in connected car and mobility, all the things I just talked about in the last 50 minutes. But like I said right up front, we also have one foot firmly planted in today's challenges. And one of the huge challenges we have of today is how do we continue to manufacture cars that are good for the planet, that strike that balance between being emotive, being fun to drive, but meeting the constraints of having a high fuel efficiency and low carbon dioxide emissions. And so we have a lot of research in our Research and Innovation Center dedicated to developing continued innovations in more fuel efficient powertrains, lightweighting of our vehicles, lightweighting of our powertrains, advances in alternative fuels. We're looking at natural gas engines. We're looking at fuel cell technology, continued advancements in electrification, plug-in hybrid vehicle technology, advancements in our transmissions to make the vehicle journey a little more efficient. So there's a huge body of research going on in that area as well. That's part of our firmly planted in today innovations activity. And there's a significant body of work going on there. And I spend a lot of my time and energy, and my team does too, to architect the future around powertrain technology, including alternatives like being ready for the winning economy for low carbon footprint energy, and also zero emissions vehicles like hydrogen or electrification. So,
thank you. Technology and business models are evolving infinitely faster than the insurance industry, and the law can catch up. For instance, am I going to be exposed if my co-owner in an ownership share does something stupid, or if I'm receiving money from somebody that's ride sharing? So what are you doing to try to involve the insurance industry and to some degree the legal beagles in the community that's worrying about the total solution that you're looking at?
that's one of the great things about being a vehicle company and also doing the mobility experiments is we have a full body of business professionals who engage with government relations. We have a very capable legal staff that's engaged deeply in our peer-to-peer car sharing activity. That's one of the first questions we asked ourselves is, what about the legal issues? And so we're being very thoughtful about that. One of the things that we're applying are some of the insights from how we thought about the legal implications of introducing technologies over the last 50 years. For example, here's probably my favorite example. When we introduced cruise control, the same questions were asked. Well, what if somebody rear-ends somebody when they've got their car set on cruise control? You know, is the car company liable because cruise control says go 70 no matter what? Well, the answer was thankfully no, because you are still responsible for driving that vehicle. And so I think the same kind of very practical use cases are going to play out in these new models of mobility and including autonomous driving. We just have to get smarter and educate ourselves and educate lawmakers, which is why we've engaged them up front in our pilots. And that's also why we're going relatively slow doing experiments and pilots before we go into a full-blown service. Great question. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Washington. Thank you very much. I'm Saval Oz from Continental Intelligent Transportation Services, and my question has to do with mobility equal to freedom,
Yep.
equal to on-demand,
Yep.
equal to real-time, and equal to having a huge knowledge of predictive cycles in a layer of software, which to some degree we haven't really built out there in the IoT yet.
Yeah.
And my question is related to how is Ford looking at this layer of intelligence that, call it predictive knowledge, call it the new generation of where we're going with computing. How are we looking and how is Ford looking to build that, that layer which is required for these systems to be used by not just us, but the Generation Zs who are very familiar and digitally native?
Great question, and we recognize the need to do that very thoughtfully, and again, just like privacy, to design that right up front. Earlier this year, you may have heard that we hired for the first time, a chief data analytics officer. This guy has forgotten more about data in the last 15 seconds than I've ever known. And he's building out a global team, and he's also developing a very thoughtful and strategic plan that he's already begun to implement to underpin these mobility services that will enable us to do the actionable insight and the data analytics around the data streams that we're going to collect, recognizing that vehicles process tens and tens and tens of millions of bytes of data every hour. And on top of the kind of data streams that are going to come from users who use vehicles on demand and peer-to-peer sharing and so on and so forth. So we need to have a very thoughtful data analytics layer that we can use to create actionable insights to make the experience better over time, just like, you know, Amazon is better the more you use it. Just like, you know, when you take an Uber ride, the next time you take it, they know a little more about you. So this is going to be no different. So we're being very thoughtful and very deliberate about that. We're not doing it alone. We've contracted a number of, you know, pretty big names in the data analytics world and the Internet of Things world to work with us. We haven't publicly announced those yet, but we're partnering with some pretty powerful technology companies to help us do that. So great question.
We're going to take 2 more questions, and then we're going to open it up for our networking reception event. So we can take one more over here.
Hi, my name is Coleman. Thanks for your presentation.
Yep.
In looking at what you've presented so far, it looks like there's a huge amount of emphasis on technology overlay on personal mobility. But if you look at the numbers, and particularly at megacities, the most efficient transportation systems are rail, and of those, most of them are electrified. And that requires a huge overlay, not just of technology, but also of legislation. You need to have a government or a city that supports that. If you contrast London with New York City, for example, you'll see in London they're really good about passing laws and building the infrastructure. In New York, when you get into the tri-borough area, things fall apart. I'm wondering 2 questions. One, what is Ford doing on the legislative front to truly enable mobility? And 2, are you looking at anything with your extended product suite, like, for example, road trains built of buses?
On the legislative front, we've begun the dialogue with our government relations group, and nothing concrete yet, but the dialogue has begun. So I'd just say more to come there. They're engaged, and they know that the conversation with the policymakers needs to be part of our long-term multimodal mobility solution set. So very astute observation there. On the second point, we've done a lot of study about the existing modes of transportation in these large cities and megacities. And while, yes, rail and the bus system is and subway systems are very important, and depending on the city, it's varying levels of maturity and capability and desirability for use. What we're finding in our analysis is that while that's true, there's still this huge body of consumers and users who just don't want to ride rail and take public transportation. And that's why if you just look at any of these megacities, the roads are just packed with cars all the time. And so there's clearly a thirst and a desire to own and drive and ride in vehicles. And so our solution set is looking at leveraging the rail system, but also providing the last mile solution, because even those who ride the rail often get in a car at the endpoint of the rail to get to the last mile or at the first mile. And for those who don't want to ride the rail, particularly the middle class and wealthy population in the Asia Pacific region, they're riding in cars and they're being driven around. And so there needs to be a solution to take some stress out of the infrastructure. I think we have time for one more.
Yeah, one more. So if we go back a couple of years and we don't have any electric cars or driverless cars, whatever, and then we look forward to the future, when will the tipping point come when 50% of the miles or 50% of the hours we spend in vehicles are now on these new type of vehicles, driverless cars or e-bikes? And what impact will that have on a mega trend maybe you didn't discuss, which is healthcare? So driverless cars will have less accidents and there'll be less pollution in the air, so we'll have some less healthcare costs. So when does that 50% time come, and how much will it reduce healthcare?
I'm not smart enough to predict the tipping point.
Yes, you are.
I'm not. I am not smart enough to predict the tipping point, but I will tell you that we see within the next, I would say 5 to 10 years, a major inflection. And that inflection is going to happen when the real possibility of having fully autonomous vehicles intersect with the more significant uptake of vehicle usage on demand and vehicle swapping and flexible vehicle use. Because imagine the possibilities, right? So instead of looking for a parking spot, the vehicle just drops you off and then it parks itself, right? You're not just being driven in a vehicle on demand like you can with Lyft or Uber today, but it's automatic. It's an autonomous vehicle, and if the conditions aren't such that it's autonomous, somebody's driving it. So there's all kinds of possibilities of the future. That tipping point's going to happen when the sensor technology gets to a low enough cost that people, the majority of people, can afford to buy, or fleets can afford to be populated with fully autonomous vehicles. and the acceptance around these flexible usership modes have reached the tipping point, and all that comes together. I think that's where the inflection is going to occur. That's why we're focusing on it now. And that's why we've declared that we're innovating everywhere to put our focus on being both a vehicle and a mobility company. Because we don't think it's going to be enough to just say, I can write a really cool app to stitch together an option for mobility. We think if you know something about cars, and you can build great vehicles, including autonomous vehicles, and you know something about how sensors work, and you have access to the data from the vehicles, and you know something about the customers who buy cars, that combined with the mobility services gives us a unique perspective in terms of enabling mobility solutions for the future. That's why we're focused on it. Thanks for your attention and time. It was great discussion.
Thank you, Ken. We appreciate your time, really interesting view in the future, and please join us in the lobby for some refreshments. Thanks, everybody.